My name is Henry, and I used to work the night shift at a small-town mortuary in upstate New York. I've never believed in ghosts. Still don't, at least not in the sense of the classic sheet-draped phantoms. But something happened to me in the winter of 2018 that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. Something so disturbingly real that I left the job, changed towns, and haven't stepped foot near a funeral home since. The mortuary, Ralston and Bell, had been around for over a century. The building was old, stone foundation, creaky wood floors, and a basement embalming room that reeked of chemicals and death. It had a morgue-style cooler with heavy steel drawers, the kind that groan when you pull them out. We handled maybe 3 to 5 bodies a week, mostly old folks, the occasional overdose. Quiet, manageable. That winter had been brutally cold. The snow piled up to the windows, and the roads were slick with ice. I lived alone, didn't have much of a social life. That made me the perfect candidate for the night shift. Midnight to 8 a.m. I didn't mind. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, a book, and patrol the halls, tidy up, prepare bodies when needed. One Thursday night, I clocked in as usual. My supervisor, Glenn, had left me a note on the desk. Body dropped off. Male, approx 40, found frozen in car. Police said engine died. ID, James L. Turnbull, no next of kin. Keep him in drawer 3 until we hear more. Drawer 3 was near the back of the cooler. It groaned like hell when you pulled it. James L. Turnbull was lying there stiff, his skin tinged blue-gray. Frost clung to his eyelashes. I remember thinking he looked peaceful. People always say that, but it was true this time. I went about my routine, cleaned the prep room, double-checked the death certificates, made notes in the ledger. By 2 a.m., I was sitting at the desk in the front office, reading The Shining. Ironic, I know. When I heard the metallic screech of a drawer sliding open, my heart jumped. No one else was supposed to be in the building. I stood, flashlight in hand, and crept toward the cooler. The door was shut, the temperature panel blinking steadily. I hesitated, then opened it. Drawer 3 was fully extended. Turnbull's body lay just as I'd left it, except his head had shifted. It was now turned to the side, facing the door. I stared, unblinking. Then slowly I reached in and straightened his head back, closed the drawer. I chalked it up to my error. Maybe I hadn't closed it properly. But when I returned to the office, the chair behind the desk was turned around. I hadn't left it like that. It was a big leather chair with brass studs, old and heavy. I always sat in it while reading. Now it faced the window. I didn't sit back down. I walked the halls with the flashlight instead, trying to convince myself I was just tired. The silence of the mortuary had never bothered me before. That night, it felt dense, like the building was holding its breath. By 4 a.m., I was jittery with nerves and caffeine. I decided to get some air. I stepped out back where we kept the trash bins, lit a cigarette, and tried to calm down. Snowflakes drifted down in lazy spirals. The world was still. When I stepped back inside, the cooler door was wide open. I rushed in. Drawer 3 was open again, empty. My stomach dropped. I staggered backward, heart racing. Then I saw the wet footprints on the tile, bare feet. Human. They led out of the cooler, across the embalming room and down the hall. I followed. They stopped at the viewing room. The door creaked open under my touch. The room was dark, save for the weak moonlight bleeding through the curtains. On the couch, meant for grieving families, sat Turnbull. He was upright, hands folded in his lap. His eyes were open. I didn't scream, I should have, but my voice caught in my throat. I just stared, paralyzed. Then he turned his head, just a few degrees. His neck made a quiet cracking sound. I backed away slowly, bumping into the doorframe. His lips parted. Not wide, just a twitch, enough to show a sliver of teeth. Then he slumped sideways, like a puppet with its strings cut. I ran. I stayed outside until daylight. When Glenn arrived, I told him I'd fallen asleep and thought I'd seen something. I didn't want to sound insane. He laughed it off. We went in together. Drawer 3 was closed. Turnbull was inside. No sign he'd ever moved. I tried to convince myself I'd hallucinated it. Lack of sleep. Maybe the book had messed with my head. But then things got worse. Over the next week, the cooler door would randomly open. Drawer 3 would slide out. Tools would go missing, only to show up in strange places. The embalming pump once ended up in the breakroom sink. The motion sensor lights would flicker, even when I stood perfectly still. And I began to hear whispers, late at night, from the walls, from the vents, from the floor beneath my feet. Indistinct at first, then clearer. My name, always my name. Henry. I stopped sleeping. I looked like a ghost myself. Glenn noticed, told me to take a night off. I didn't argue. But that night I had the dream. I was in the mortuary, walking the halls, but everything was upside down. The walls were bleeding, the drawers in the cooler slammed open and shut, and Turnbull was standing at the end of the hall, arms outstretched, mouth open in a silent scream. His skin was cracking, black veins spreading like tree roots. I woke up gasping. The next night I returned to work, determined to end the nonsense. I brought salt, like I'd seen in some online forum, and drew a circle in the cooler. I lit sage. I muttered every prayer I could remember. Nothing happened until 3:33 a.m. The building trembled, not like an earthquake, more like something breathing beneath it. A low rumble, almost imperceptible, except I could feel it in my teeth. The cooler door slammed open. Every drawer slid out. I could hear whispering echoing from all directions. My name, again and again. I stepped back, but the floor felt soft. Like meat, I looked down. It was no longer tile. It was flesh. Pulsing, grey-pink flesh. I fell. I don't remember hitting the ground. I woke up hours later, curled in the break room, shivering. Glenn found me and called an ambulance. They said I had a breakdown. Maybe I did, but I know what I saw. Turnbull's body vanished 3 days later. No explanation, no paperwork. Glenn swore he didn't authorize a transfer. Police were called. Nothing came of it. I quit that day. Now I live in a small apartment in Buffalo. I work at a bookstore. I avoid mirrors, cold places, and the number 3. Sometimes at night, I still hear my name whispered. Henry, but I never answer. My name is Dave, and I used to think I had one of the most secure jobs in the world, handling dead people. They don't talk back, don't complain, and don't care about politics. I was dead wrong. I worked at a mortuary just outside Chicago, in a facility connected to the hospital. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and I liked the solitude. My shift was evenings, 4 p.m. to midnight. I was in charge of receiving bodies from the hospital morgue, prepping them for autopsy or embalming, and making sure the place stayed clean and orderly. There were 2 of us on shift usually, but sometimes, when we were short, I handled things solo. That's how it was the night everything went to hell. It was a Tuesday in early November. The temperature had dipped below freezing, and the wind outside howled like something alive. I was alone. My co-worker, Troy, had called in sick. The hospital had just wheeled down a fresh arrival, middle-aged woman, heart attack, standard procedure. I checked her in, tagged her toe, and slid her into one of the wall coolers. About an hour later, I got the call. Another incoming body. This time it was an older man, name unknown. He'd been found in a storage closet on the hospital's 3rd floor. No ID. He wasn't on any patient list, and no one recognized him. Security was still trying to figure out how he'd gotten into the building. When they brought him down, I remember the nurses looked disturbed. "What's wrong with him?" I asked. "Something's off," one said. "His skin feels like leather." I took a look. She wasn't exaggerating. His skin was gray-brown, with a cracked texture, dried like he'd been mummified. His eyes were shut, but not sunken. He didn't look dead. He looked preserved, ancient. "He looks like he's been dead for weeks," I said. "We just found him an hour ago," the nurse replied. I tagged him and placed him into the oldest vault we had, Vault 6. It hadn't been used in over a year. The latch was finicky, and you had to slam it to get it to shut right. I made sure it was sealed. That night I went about my business, did the logs, cleaned the tools, prepped the next morning's embalming station. Around 10:45 p.m. I heard knocking. 3 short taps. I froze. It was coming from the cooler room. I told myself it was the pipes. Old buildings always make noises. But as I approached the cooler room door, I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. I opened the door slowly. The overhead lights flickered to life. Vault 6 was unlatched, hanging slightly open. A cold wave of air rolled out, and I caught a whiff of something foul. Not decay, worse, like moldy earth and something metallic. I shut the door, latched Vault 6 tight and walked away quickly. Told myself I hadn't sealed it properly, made a mental note to tell maintenance. But that's when I started hearing the whispering. Faint, just on the edge of perception, like a radio left on in another room. At first, I thought it was someone in the hospital hallway, but every time I went to check, it stopped. The moment I returned to the cooler, it started again. I tried turning on music to drown it out, but the whispers got louder, not in volume, in clarity. Let me out! I stopped what I was doing, turned off the music. Let me out, Dave! The voice came from Vault 6. I didn't open it, I couldn't. My hands were trembling. Instead, I backed out of the cooler and locked the door behind me. I called hospital security. They arrived 10 minutes later. I told them someone was in the cooler, maybe alive. They rolled their eyes but humored me. We opened Vault 6. The body was there. Still, eyes shut, same leathery skin. Nothing changed. Security left. I stayed until my shift ended, but I didn't go back into the cooler. I stayed in the front office, pacing. I didn't even lock up when I left. Just walked out into the freezing dark and drove home in silence. That night I had a dream. I was back in the mortuary, standing before Vault 6. It opened by itself. The man sat up. His mouth was sewn shut, but the stitches tore open as he spoke. "We are not buried. We are kept." I woke in a cold sweat. I called in sick the next day. When I returned Thursday, I was told Vault 6 was empty. The body had disappeared. No paperwork, no security footage. I asked my boss if anyone had moved it. "What body?" he asked. "The John Doe from Tuesday night." He looked at me like I was crazy. "You logged one body on Tuesday, the heart attack case. No John Doe." I checked the logs, my handwriting. One body, the woman, nothing else. Vault 6 wasn't even listed as operational. I opened the vault anyway, empty. But carved into the back wall were 3 words. "You let me." I quit that night. I've since moved 3 states away, taken up work in a hardware store, and haven't set foot near a mortuary since. But I still dream of the vault, and sometimes late at night I hear it. Knock, knock, knock. My name is Joel, and I used to manage a funeral home in rural Pennsylvania. The place was a family-run operation passed down through generations, and I took it over after my uncle passed. I always thought I was good at compartmentalizing death. I treated it clinically. Paperwork, embalming, viewings. Death was just another part of life. But that was before I met Hannah. It started on a Wednesday in late October. The leaves were dying in bright colors, and the air had that crisp snap of early frost. A local called in to report the body of a young woman found in a wooded ditch outside of town. No ID, no missing persons report. Just appeared. Sheriff brought her in around noon. I remember her clearly, mid-20s maybe, pale as candle wax, no visible wounds. Her eyes were open wide, glassy. Even in death they looked alive. Too alive. We logged her as Jane Doe, cleaned her up and put her in the prep room. That evening, I started the embalming process. My assistant, Kayla, had the night off, so I was alone. As I injected the formaldehyde into her carotid, I noticed something strange. Her limbs twitched, not violently, but subtly. A finger curled, a toe flexed. I paused the machine. I've embalmed hundreds of bodies. Post-mortem spasms aren't unheard of. But this was different. Her eyes were still open. I had closed them earlier, sworn I had. I shut them again, finished the process, sealed the cavity, standard procedure. I wheeled her into the cold chamber and called it a night. At 2:47 a.m., I got a call from the security company. Motion detected in the viewing room. There wasn't supposed to be anyone there. I drove back, flashlight in hand, heart already thumping. The viewing room lights were off, chairs in place, nothing disturbed. Except for the casket. It was the one we'd set aside for Jane Doe, closed earlier that day. Now the lid was open, empty. I backed away, reaching for my phone. That's when I saw her, standing in the hallway mirror. Not in front of it, in it. Her reflection stared back, head tilted, smile curling at the corners like a question mark. But when I turned around, the hall was empty. Her reflection remained. I ran, left the lights on, drove home, locked every door and didn't sleep. The next morning I returned. The casket was closed. She was inside, peaceful. I told myself I'd imagined it, sleep deprivation, stress. But over the next few days, things escalated. Every morning I came in, Jane Doe had shifted. Her arms would be folded differently, her mouth open when it had been shut, her eyes wide again, always those eyes. I asked Kayla if she'd touched the body. She swore she hadn't. We decided to rush the burial, a quick, modest service. No family had come forward. Sheriff signed off. That night I dreamed of the embalming room. Jane Doe was on the table, except she was speaking. It's not the end, it's the door, you opened it. I woke screaming. My hands smelled like formaldehyde. The day of the burial, the skies turned black. Thunder rumbled, though there was no forecast for storms. As we lowered the casket, I swear I heard tapping from inside. No one else heard it. The ground shook slightly when the dirt hit the lid. Kayla looked at me, pale as a ghost. We covered it fast, left the cemetery without speaking. That night, the funeral home alarm went off. Motion again, in the prep room. I didn't go. Instead, I watched the feed from my phone. The camera flickered. When it came back, Jane Doe was sitting up on the table, her skin pale but her eyes locked on the camera, staring. Then the feed went black. The next morning, Kayla quit. I tried to dig her up. I needed to see, needed to know I wasn't insane. But the grave was gone. The plot existed, the stone in place. But when we tried to dig, the soil went down only 2 feet before hitting solid clay. Impossible in that area, like the earth had sealed itself. I brought in a priest. He walked into the prep room, stood there 5 minutes, then came out shaking. Said the place had a presence. Told me to burn sage, pray, close it down if I could. I didn't listen. That weekend, I tried to embalm a new body. Middle-aged man, normal case. As I inserted the trocar into the cavity, a gush of black fluid sprayed out, covering my arms. The stench was unbearable, rot and soil and something sweet. I stumbled back, gagging. The man's eyes opened, and they were hers. I passed out, woke up on the floor hours later. The body was gone. Since then, things haven't returned to normal. I see her everywhere, in windows, in glass, sometimes in puddles. Her smile wider now, her mouth always just about to speak. Sometimes I hear a voice in the drain pipes of the embalming room, a girl's voice. I'm still inside. I shut the funeral home down last month, sold the building, burned the prep table. But nothing helps. She's still with me. Beneath the smell of formaldehyde, I can always smell the earth. And some nights when I'm drifting off to sleep, I hear tapping. Tap, tap, tap.